First reading is from Psalm 118. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let Israel say, his love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, his love endures forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, his love endures forever. In my anguish I cried to the Lord, and he answered by setting me free. The Lord is with me, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? The Lord is with me, he is my helper. I will look in triumph on my enemies. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. Amen. And the second reading is from Matthew, chapter 18, verses 15 to 22. If your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you lose on earth will be lost in heaven. Again, I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 come together in my name, there I am with them. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, the message this morning is all about numbers. It's all about maths, essentially. Aren't you glad you came? Ooh, yeah. Have you ever wondered, you may know this already, this may be a thing that you know. Have you ever wondered where this great big book, ever wondered where the middle of it actually falls, you know? Like if you were able to let it fall open right in the middle. And when I say in the middle, how am I counting? By number of pages? Surely that's going to vary from Bible to Bible, isn't it? Yeah. But if you, as you know, the Bible is divided into chapters and verses, yeah? I mean, you do know this, don't you? You might not do. You might be new to all this lark. The Bible is not a book. It's a collection of books. It's a library of 66 books, the Old Testament and the New Testament, all together. And each of those books is divided up into chapters and into verses, which makes it easy to find things. It's tempting to assume, actually, that it's always been that way, but it actually hasn't. I mean, you talk about the time when some of the letters in the back of the Bible were written. It was like the Bible itself did not exist. The Old Testament did. The Jewish people had always had that, but they didn't have the Gospels. The Gospels were kind of written, after Jesus' resurrection, and then the letters were written later than that. And it wasn't actually all put into a big book together, collection of books, until 200 or 300 years later at the Council of Laodicea. At that point, it was put into a collection of books, but there weren't any chapters in those books. It was kind of like, if you're in the book of Psalms, not a problem, because the book of Psalms, as you probably know, is a collection of songs. It's like a hymn book. So they're all numbered anyway, and they're all fairly short, So you could say that the book of Psalms is already organized into chapters. But a gospel? No. There'd be no indication of where to start reading. You'd kind of just start at the beginning and read through to the end, like it was essentially just a whole chapter itself. And it wasn't until much later than you might imagine, I think it was the 11th century, when a bishop decided it would be a lot more helpful for people finding things in here if there were chapters and verses in each of the books. That includes the Exodus, so the Isaiah, books of prophecy, the Gospels, and also even the letters. Some of the letters, of course, are very short, like Philemon, only 1 chapter long. So no point in dividing that further. But it's still got verses so that you can specifically and precisely find the bit of the Bible that you want to go at. Well, if you took all of those chapters, all of the chapters in the Bible, and you wanted to go for the middle chapter in the whole of the Bible, which book of the Bible do you think it might fall in? That's a very good educated guess. You are absolutely right. It's the book of Psalms. What's the longest psalm in the book of Psalms? 119. How many verses has it got? It's like a school RE lesson, isn't it? How many verses? Anybody know? How many? How many? Oh, you're getting close, nearly. Is that Brian saying that? What you need to know about Brian is he's already been at my service at Wesley Rock, so he thinks he knows all the answers, but even he... But that would have been such a score, wouldn't it, brother? You knew to the faith and everything, 176 verses. Brian's not allowed to answer anymore. What's the shortest psalm? 180. No. 117. How many verses has it got? 2 is correct. Very short. The central chapter of the Bible, the chapter that out of the whole lot is right in the middle, is Psalm 118. Weirdly, spookily sandwiched between the shortest psalm and the longest psalm. And Adele read part of it to us this morning. When you're in Psalm 118, if you can be bothered, you don't have to do this, I've done it for you, all right? If you count up all the chapters that come before it, right from the beginning of Genesis, it comes to 594 chapters. If you count all the chapters that come after Psalm 118, right to the end of Revelation, it comes to 594 chapters. If you add those numbers together, 594 squared, what do you get? Oh, aren't you glad you came? 1,188. The central verse in the entire Bible is Psalm 118, verse 8. And what does it say? It's better to put your trust in God than it is to put your trust in man. So that's a good central verse. Now, I've sort of rolled this out to people, and you'd be maybe one of them, and you say, no, it's just coincidence, just numbers, innit? There's nothing more sort of than that, really. Fair play, fair play. But what I've always been really keen on in my faith, in fact, my entry into the Christian faith was through mathematics. Not that I'm particularly good at mathematics, but it was through mathematics. You see, we live in a universe that is enormous and expanding all of the time. Millions and billions and trillions of stars, all moving outwards at the speed of light. You look up at the night sky, you get the merest glimpse, all those points of light, which are themselves not planets. Well, some of them are. Most of them are stars, star systems. Some of them are so far away that now we've got that new telescope, whose the name of it I've forgotten, and it can look so far out into space, it literally looks back in time. It looks back in time to prehistory. It looks back in time to close to the beginning of the universe, the origin of the universe itself. And I, like you, know, we are convinced that the reason that all of it, any of it, exists in the first place is because it has a creator. It's not purely random. If it was purely random and there was no one who had designed it and made it and put it in place, it would never hang together in such fine balance as it does. There are rules to the universe which God himself has set in place. Rules of mathematics, rules of physics, rules of chemistry, and rules of biology, without which the whole thing would be chaotic. And you may argue that the universe is chaotic, but I'm going to disagree with you and say that it is perfectly ordered and finely balanced. You look at our planet, let's just zoom in on our bit of the universe, which is very, very small. Our planet Earth is finely balanced, 93 million miles from the sun. I told you a lot of numbers in this sermon, all right? 93 million miles from the sun. If we were a fraction closer, we would all burn up. If we're a fraction further away, we would all freeze and all human life would be impossible. We look at the other planets in our solar system. We look at the next one nearest to the sun, which is Venus, which is about 200 degrees centigrade at the surface and covered in toxic gas. We could not live there. We look at Mars, which is the one further out, where people are quite keen on going because you could actually get there and you could stand there, but the atmosphere is too thin to breathe. And it's a dry planet, certainly is now, even if it had water on it. It's a hostile environment where life does not exist without some sort of man-made exoskeletal sort of environment. We are finely balanced. It is possible that in the entire universe, this planet is the only one capable of sustaining organic life. It's possible. I mean, okay, the probabilities are stacked against it, but it's possible. You might say, why has God made such an enormous universe that's expanding all the time, just to focus his attention on this tiny blue planet and make it super abundant with life? Why? You've heard that thing that says we're all made of stardust. And you think, oh, hippie, trippy nonsense. No, it's true. In order for you to exist, star systems have had to have enough time to form, stars to burn, and then to die, to run out of fuel, which takes thousands and millions of years, and then to start releasing carbon from their dying stars, which then travels back across the universe for billions of light years to form you. So when we say it's all about Jesus, look how much he in his grace has made it all about you. That he's created this amazing universe. You stand there, you look at the night sky, you look at the full moon, you observe the planets moving around, you observe the impact that they have, the things that they do in keeping that balance so in place. And we wonder at it. And that's the most amazing thing of all, is the beauty of mathematics, the beauty of science. The fact that as it all hangs together and it's all bound by these principles that God has put in place. But it's also supremely beautiful. And we are the only creatures in the universe that can observe that God-made beauty. And he has made us, in part, one of our great purposes in life is that we can look at a sunset over Mounts Bay, or we can marvel at a mirror-like sea, or we can marvel at a stormy sea, and we can give God the glory for it. He loves that. That's why he's made it. And if you look out at space, that new telescope, the name of it I can't remember, and it's taken some amazing pictures lately of what they call the pillars of creation. Do you know what I'm talking about? Out there in space, you Google it, the pillars of creation. And out there in space, millions of light years away, there are like kind of 3 or 4 columns of gas where stars are being formed. And it looks literally like the hand of God. The way that it appears is like the hand of God. You check it out. I defy you to say, whoa, that doesn't look like God's hand creating stars, because that's what he has made it look like. So far, so good. Do you know that in the field of mathematics and science, but particularly mathematics, there is the highest proportion of believers? Like, you take any job that there is, whatever it might be, and a certain percentage of people who do that job will believe in God, will be people of faith. One of the least, apparently, is long-distance lorry drivers. But, you know, I mean, it's easy to see, isn't it? You spend most of your time alone in the cab of your lorry driving along. Who's going to witness to you? Who's going to tell you about Jesus? How do you get to church? It's very hard. One of the most highest proportion of believers is mathematicians. Why is that? Because they look at the beauty and the purity and the created order of maths and physics. It's true in physics too, chemistry and biology. And a big proportion of them cannot deny that it must be the work of a creator. If you don't believe me, examine some of the numbers. Let's consider pi. I'm not talking steak and kidney pie. Just get that out of your mind. That's for later. All right? I'm talking about pi, the number. What is the number, anybody, to as many decimal places as you know it? Come on. Oh, whoa. Who said that? Was that you, Gavin? Give it to us again, bro.
3.1415926.
That's really impressive. That deserves a round of applause, actually. Pi is the number. You know this? Pi, you remember this from school? Pi is the number that expresses the ratio between the diameter and the circumference of a circle, isn't it? So you can do trigonometry. Remember that? When I was at school, I'm of a certain age. When I was at school, we had slide rules. Do you remember those? Yeah. Then pocket calculators came out. This was in the 70s, and we all threw our slide rules away. But I remember sitting there as a teenager doing trigonometry. And I remember having a set of log tables. Remember those? And they had other things in as well. Cosines, sines, tangents. Oh, it's all coming back to you now. What a nostalgia trip. And I remember doing all this stuff about working out angles and circumference using pi, 3.142 we usually, or 3.1417. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to need this in real life. Why are we doing this? And all my mates are saying, why were we doing this rubbish? And at the age of 16, I left school and joined the Merchant Navy as a navigator. I used my log tables every single day of my working life. And the trigonometry was different. It was spherical. It was a lot harder. But what I discovered, and I said at the beginning of this, that was kind of my entry into Christianity, because there I was, an unbeliever, floating around on a ship in the middle of the Pacific, out there on a lonely bridge wing with my sextant in my hand, all right, looking for stars. I used to know the names of lots of the stars, so I could find them and their constellations and take bearings between their altitude from the horizon and then plot where we were. And as I did this, I thought, all of this has been worked out. All of this makes sense. The way that the stars move, the way that the planets move, the way that the moon moves. I mean, the moon's not a lot of help, to be quite honest, in navigation. But the fact that it all moves, the fact that we rotate around the sun, 365 days it takes to do it. And you can set your watch by it. All right, you've got to add an extra one every 4 years to make it work. But it's all set. The amount of time it takes for the moon to pass around the earth at 27 point something days. All set, all perfect, all balanced, so that the tides work and all the rest of it. And I remember standing there thinking, how can all of this be random? How can all of it have just happened? And I know that people say, oh, well, it's all about probabilities, and given an infinite length of time and an infinite set of probabilities, everything would happen and there would be order. No. You need someone to put it in order. You know yourself. When you go and, well, I don't know, if any of you ever had teenage children and you go into their bedroom while they're at school and go, ah, and then you put their chaos into order, which might take you a while, but it's something that has to be done. But the world is not full of chaos. The world is full of order. I heard the well-known mathematician Dr. Hannah Fry, well known for her amazing ginger hair. And she was saying that mathematics is like trying to find your way through a forest full of thorns where there is no path, full of chaos, full of stuff that appears to make no sense. And then all of a sudden, as you're doing the maths, you emerge into a clearing. And in that clearing, everything is ordered and everything makes sense. And she said, every now and again in mathematics, you discover something that gives you a forest clearing. And she said, it's fantastic. And it's what I do it for. It's amazing. And another thing is, you know, like the things that bind us, the things that are rules, that are numbers that cannot be defied. One of them is the force of gravity. Can anybody tell me the force of gravity in meters per second per second? Oh, I've got them. Oh, you're close, very close. Was that Gavin again? All right. 9.81 meters per second per second. That's the force that's holding us to the planet. Or if you believe Einstein, it's the force that's pushing the planet up to us. But we'll not go there today. All right. 9.81 meters per second per second. You can try this when you get home if you like. If you take a pendulum, a bit of string with a rock on the bottom of it, whatever, and you make it 2.545 meters long, 2.45 meters long. That's a quarter of the figure of the force of gravity. You take it, you swing the pendulum, and from the moment you swing the pendulum, you start your stopwatch. Let it swing 10 times, and then divide it by 10 to see how long it takes for the pendulum to swing from start point back again. However long the pendulum is, however big the weight is on the, but it has to be that length. It will always take 3.1417 seconds to swing, because that is the number that God has determined is a constant number. Now, this does work. You try it, yeah? It's got to be the right length of string, okay? See if it works for you. Some numbers do not change. Some numbers are, well, they're just there. And we heard about one of them in Psalm 118. Give thanks to the Lord because his love is eternal. His love is infinite. Infinity is a mathematical number, but it's more of an imagined number than a real number, isn't it? It's kind of like it goes on forever. And we struggle as human beings to understand infinity. You go, oh, infinity just lasts forever. Well, there must be an end to it. No, there isn't. It keeps going. Oh, I'm not sure I can figure that out. And we spend a lot of time, don't we, thinking about not this life, but anticipation of the next life, the kingdom, eternity. That when we leave this world, as we often say here on a Sunday morning, we will go to this next place and we will be there forever. And as much as we like that idea, there's a part of it that unsettles us because we're people living in a time frame. That's another physical, mathematical constraint. We have to live within the constraints of this time frame. And one day we'll be released from it and we think, oh, I'm not sure I want to live in a place where it never ends. Because it kind of sounds like it might get boring after a while, like a sermon that's too long. Because we can't thoroughly grasp the concept of infinity. And it is a conceptual number. It's like some numbers you can conceive of them, but you can't evaluate them. Like the square root of -1. What's the square root of -1, anybody? No, 1 times 1 is 1. It kind of doesn't exist, but it does exist because you can conceptualize it. It's the square root of -1. It's what mathematicians call an imaginary number. And you think, well, it doesn't exist there. Yeah, but they can use that imaginary number and others, there are lots of them, to make real calculations of real things. In the same way, there are things that God has hidden from us, which are not currently part of our human existence, but they're still here. There is much that is unseen. Where is heaven? Is it millions and billions of light years away? Or is it just a case, if you could do it, of stepping between dimensions like that? And you could be there. Remember, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is close by. It's at hand. It's much nearer than you think. Scientists have discovered, have they not, that the vast majority of the whole universe is not even visible to us. It's composed of dark matter and dark energy. Something like 80 or more percent of the universe, it's there, but we can't see it, and currently we can't measure it. And I hear this and I go, well, that's where heaven is then, surely. It's in that hidden part. We can't go there. It's been kept from us. So we've heard about infinity. We've heard about the fact that God has put all the numbers into place. We've heard about, and it's so annoying, where in the past people used to say sort of religion, and science are opposed. They're absolutely not. I hope I'm proving that to you, that they're absolutely combined and connected. But there are all sorts of numbers in the Bible as well. Numbers with particular significance. Obviously 3 is one of them. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. 3, Jesus died and came back on the 3rd day. Jonah was lost to the world for 3 days. 3 is a big number, and it's of a significance. And they're not magic numbers, but when they were used in the context of when they were written in the Bible, they would mean things to people. So it's kind of like when you hear that Jesus went into the desert for 40 days, and then he was tempted by the devil. 40 is the number of endurance. People would read that 40 days might not have actually been 40 days. That's not important, but it was a long period, and it was a period where endurance was required. Look at the other 40. That's Noah's flood. 40 days of storms and rain before the water started to go down. A period of endurance. Sometimes we have to get through a 40-day period of endurance, and it's not even 40 days. It may be 40 years. That's what it was for the Israelite nation in the desert. They wandered in the Exodus for full-on 40 years of camping before they found their true home. The numbers go on and on and on. I could keep boring you with them, but I want to come into land now, as they say, by saying that in Matthew 18, Jesus gives us a 3-point plan for dealing with issues of sin within the church community. He gives us a program, a process. Praise God that he does. It takes the guesswork out of it. But again, that's another sermon. And then crucially, and this is the final bit, he said all this stuff about when people sin in church and, the importance of forgiveness and how difficult it can be to forgive people, which it can. We all know this. But it's something that we have to kind of keep on at, because at the end of the day, it will only end up trapping us, not them. And so Peter's thinking about all of this, and he thinks, well, there must be special numbers for this, because there's special numbers for everything. Pi, 3.147. Well, he wouldn't know pi, would he? So he goes, Jesus, like if somebody hurts me and I forgive them, if they hurt me again, all right, I'll forgive them again. But how many times? Because it's going to get really tiring if they just keep hurting me in their words or their deeds. 7, 7 often in the Bible is the perfect number. Remember the number of the beast is 666. Which is always one short from the power of God, which means that the devil can never win. He can only be irritating and annoying. So Peter says to Jesus, 7 is it? So if I forgive my brother 7 times, is that enough? And Jesus says, no. This is the thing about numbers, Peter. Numbers run the universe. But when it comes to people, we are so much more complicated. Because you have to put in emotions. You have to put in feelings. You have to put in that thing that God desires most of all for all of us to have, love. You cannot quantify love. You can't put numbers on it. You can't make equations for it. As far as I know, the value of pi is completely useless in determining love. Can you imagine it? 2 mathematicians on Valentine's Day. How much do you love me? I love you 3.147 times. Oh, really? That much? I know. That may happen, but we're much more complicated. Jesus says, you want to forgive your brother? Don't put a number on it. Just keep on doing it. Keep on doing it. Never hold a grudge. It's easy for me to trot that out, isn't it? Much harder to do. But then maths is hard to do, isn't it? You've got to keep giving it to God. Giving it to God. Giving it to God. In that Matthew 18 instruction about people who keep hurting you, about bringing down the name of the church, people who are clearly sinning, Jesus says there comes a point where you have no option but to walk away. And that sometimes, sadly, for all of us, is what we have to do. Yeah? In fact, I've just got a little verse on this. I think I may have given away here it is. Romans 16, verse 17, and I'll kind of finish with this. It's right at the end of Romans. Just so that we're in no doubt, because, God never said that we should allow ourselves to be treated as a doormat by people. Emotions can be very difficult. Feelings are difficult to plumb. It's easy to love people, but it's so easy to hurt them. Some of you know all too well in your relationships that they've gone tragically and horribly wrong. And you've never wanted that, and maybe other members of your family haven't wanted it, but it's happened. Feelings, it's difficult. It's easy when you're at school. I was never that good at maths at school. But I did know that in a maths exam, you could get 100% if you got everything right, because it's either right or wrong. And equally, if you were really rubbish at it, you could get 0%. But in English and music, which were the 2 subjects that I was best at, you'd get marks for something. You'd never get 0 for writing an essay. You'd never get 0 for doing a composition of music. You'd always get something. Equally, you'd never get 100% either, because how could you have a perfect piece of prose or a perfect piece of music? You can't. So it's different. And when we look at our faith and our relationships and our feelings, it's not empirical. It's not all numbers and there's only one answer. I reckon that's why so many mathematicians are Christians, because it's easy, it all falls into place. But here in Romans 16 verse 7 it says this: I urge you, brothers and sisters, to watch out for those who cause divisions and put obstacles in your way that are contrary to the teaching you have learned. And here's the instruction: keep away from them. Sometimes, when you've said all you have to say, then the only thing that's left to do is walk away. And it hurts us, and it's not a good answer, but sometimes that's how it is. Equally, sometimes, if life has beaten you up over the years and it's reduced you to something that you were never meant to be by God, when you come forward to God, He can lift you up, He can restore you, He can transform you into that person that you were always meant to be.